Have you ever been to a place that inspired love at first sight? My first visit to Hosah Prairie was in 2011 as part of a seed collection foray at the North Unit of Illinois Beach State Park, organized by Illinois Department of Natural Resource ecologist Dwayne Ambrose. I had helped Don Wilson and his stewardship team for several years previous, participating in natural areas restoration workdays. So I was happy to visit a different area of the park. What I saw on that sunny October day was breathtaking. Acres and acres of dune and swale, rolling surf, and open space where you could hear your own thoughts clearly. To get to our workday site, we walked down the North Unit Trail, then cut through the black oak savanna and carefully crossed some low swales. The swales were full of shockingly blue gentians and many other rare plants. We did our best not to step on them as we headed to the sand prairie where the blazing star and other seeds were ready to collect. We wandered the dunes, filling our bags, learning new species, finding some rare ones. I was grateful to have some expert botanists along. It was a memorable day. A few years later, I ran into Lake County Forest Preserve ecologist Ken Click at the South Unit of Illinois Beach, leading a College of Lake County field trip. Ken asked us whether we'd like to join him up at Hosah Park for a monitoring foray. It'll only be 5 minutes, he said. I was anxious to see the site again through the eyes of one of our region's premier ecologists. We met at the parking area and walked over to the Panay, a flat, seasonally inundated wetland, which holds a very diverse assemblage of rare plants, so rare that some live nowhere else in the state of Illinois. We were in there for an hour and a half. I marveled at Ken's knowledge of these tiny rare plants and tried to be mindful of the privilege of his time by restraining my impulse to ask him hundreds of questions. We covered a lot of territory that day, but I saw something else in the Panay that bothered me. Two species of invasive buckthorn and non-native honeysuckle. As a 15-year steward of Granger Woods in Lake County and rare plant monitor with plants of concern, I knew what a scourge they are in our natural areas. I wonder if they'll let me help, was the first thought that came to mind. I recognized right away what a unique place it was, and I was afraid of what would happen if the buckthorn took over. But first I had to find out who owned and managed the site. Finally, a call to the Zion Park District resulted in scheduling an in-person meeting with its director, Marilyn Krieger. In the meantime, I reached out to my friend Karen Tharp at the Illinois Nature Conservancy. She found a 1989 species list by Dr. Wayne Shunem and emailed it to me. I also reached out to botanist Linda Curtis. Turns out she'd done a sedge inventory of Hosah just a few years before. I added that to Dr. Shunem's list. Then I learned that Hosah was an eBird hotspot with almost 180 species cited. Rich Hierchek, my botany teacher at the Morton Arboretum, had done a lichen inventory. I added those to the list too. The more I learned of this amazing site, the more pressing its need for care seemed to be. I had no assurance that there would be a positive outcome, but I did have hope. With some trepidation, I went into the meeting with Marilyn and gave her the required volunteer application and indemnification forms. I felt comfortable with her right away. With a bit more courage, I mentioned that I'd put together a current species list built on Dr. Shunem's, but adding other species we'd seen since. She nodded. Then I handed her the proposed management plan. I was all too well aware what level of moxie it took of me, a person who she didn't know at all yet, to spring this on her. Mrs. Krieger told me she loved Hosah, that she and her husband walked there several times a week, and that she was glad someone wanted to step up and help take care of it. I was surprised and certainly overjoyed. But the hard work lay ahead. To become a steward, you need to not only develop a deep knowledge of the site, but also to build a support network. I set up a meeting at Hosah with University of Wisconsin-Madison botany professor Tom Givnish. He taught me the names of many plants that live at Hosah while we explored the edge of the Panay and walked down to the beach. At McDonald's afterwards, my son called to say my second grandchild, Ellie, had just been born. The birth of my second stewardship initiative and second grandchild, the synchronicity was incredible. Karen Tharp from the Nature Conservancy was thrilled to hear my plan had been approved by the Park District. She offered to help via their grant program, providing tools and supplies for restoration. Steve Myers from the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission emailed his support, saying that Hosah was one of the sites they would love to add to their nature preserves inventory because of its high quality, and volunteers with professional affiliations at the Field Museum, Lake County Forest Preserves, the City of Zion, and surrounding areas asked how they could help too. Many bright minds were on board. Now we needed some more muscle. I reached out to Laurel Ross, Urban Conservation Director at the Field Museum, and she and a dozen others came out to our first frigid group workday. Then I called Marion Cartwright, board member of Lake Forest Open Lands, and she put me in touch with Susie Hoffman, director of the Center for Conservation Leadership. Susie graciously sent me a series of high school student interns to help at Hosah. They were an enthusiastic and multifaceted crew. Our first intern, Yesenia Sanchez, brought off her fellow classmates and even family that summer to pull invasive sweet clover and then tackle copses of buckthorn and fly honeysuckle that fall and winter. They worked incredibly hard and skillfully, cutting and bagging brush. We could not build and burn brush piles because of public access and the sensitivity of the site, so all the brush had to be bagged by us, then removed by the Zion Parks District staff in their truck. Linda Curtis and her husband Jim, John and Jane Balaban, Ken and Rory Click and their family, Wayne Shunem, and many others came out the second summer to botanize and pull sweet clover. I once even lured Indiana State botanist Scott Namasnek up to hold a Willow ID workshop. I was shocked to see how many people loved this hidden gem and wanted to share their time and talent so generously. Several volunteers from other Lake County sites, Evan and Paula Craig, Will Overbeck, Don Wilson, Karen Lustig, Heather Decker, Greg Jerzik, David Johannesson, Barbara Bell, Lisa Culp, Laura Murray, Ashley and Steve Wold, Greg Reisky, Shelley Kiefer, and others came out to work days. Gretel Kiefer from Plants of Concern provided important floristic support, as did Suzanne Macy. Tom Smith, former volunteer stewardship coordinator for the Lake County Forest Preserves, was an important support to us throughout, as was Mark Kluge. We even had a former engineer with the nearby Zion Nuclear Power Plant, Ernest Wright, join us for many workdays. Ernie, who had helped commission, then design, then decommission the power plant, served as an expert witness to the federal government on nuclear plants. He told me he would walk over to Hosah every day and eat his lunch there when the weather permitted. It was so restful. As Jerome McDonald puts it, here is this unique natural area that has seen the most intense form of industrialization in just a few square miles. Nuclear plants, asbestos factories, coal plants, and here's someone from that world coming to love and heal it. People from anywhere can recognize the value of biodiversity if they get a chance, and Ernie was living proof. It's hard to believe, but not too long ago, we almost lost Hosah entirely. There were plans in the late 1980s to build a marina along the lakeshore, and the city of Zion was in negotiations to have it placed just north of what was then the Zion Nuclear Power Station. Unlike the nearby state park, Hosah doesn't have nature preserve protection. The hope was that developing the park into a marina, it would bring jobs and revenue to what had been a bustling town back at the turn of the 20th century, but it's since lost both. But at what cost to the earth? Barbara Reed Turner, Steve Packard, and Jill Moreland from the Nature Conservancy got wind of the plan. They persuaded Bob Pushy from the Zion Park District to hire Dr. Shinham to write up the species inventory. Steve set up town hall meetings with the community. Local people remembered that this was a holy site, a place where its founder, Minister John Dowie, would hold full immersion baptisms for the church that was at Zion's heart. And in fact, they continued to do so until fairly recently. At some point, you have to make a moral choice. Jesus had said, you cannot serve both God and money. In this case, preserving this precious remnant, a 23-acre microcosm of the biodiversity of neighboring Illinois Beach State Park, was the clear good choice. But it wasn't easy. Money talks. But eventually, the folks at the Nature Conservancy and the supporters in Zion, working for the higher good, prevailed. The marina was built in a degraded area of Winthrop Harbor instead. This unique city park was saved. Shortly after, a pavilion and boardwalk were installed to protect the fragile dune and swale system from trampling by the feet of the visitors, but also to give people seating and shelter to enjoy the beach. Later, a bike rack and interpretive signage would be added. The world came to recognize how special this region is, too. In 2015, the United Nations Ramsar Convention on Wetlands designated the Chilwaukee, Illinois Beach Lake Plain as a wetland of international importance, one of only 38 sites in the United States to achieve this recognition. Hosah was part of the 3,914 acres of the total lake plain so dedicated. So, what is so special about Hosah? Formed by sand moving down the lake shore from the Root River after the recession of Lake Algoma, it is in the geologically youngest part of the state of Illinois. The Waukegan moorlands are approximately only 1,800 years old, according to recent carbon dating done by geologist Michael Krastowski. The moorlands' pennays are unique and of international importance. I do not use the word unique arbitrarily. In its approximately 23 acres, 230 native species have been documented, with an additional 40 adventive species noted, bringing its total plant species up to 270, with a native mean C of 6.5. 19 of those native species are listed as threatened or endangered, and many more are regionally rare. And every year, we find new species. In addition to its floristic diversity, 193 bird species have been sighted there, along with an array of lichens, mosses, reptiles, amphibians, and insects, including the rare Olympia marble butterfly, whose host is sandcress, an uncommon plant species obligate to our duneslands. Marlon Bowles attempted a reintroduction of the endangered Carner blue butterfly just north of Hosah's border in 1997. It's such a special place, you can understand the flood of gratitude I felt when Marilyn Krieger introduced me to her park district staff as the steward of Hosah Park. A year later, when my granddaughter was just learning to walk, I brought my son and his family down to Hosah to visit. We walked down the path and east onto the boardwalk. From the last leg of the boardwalk, we walked over 100 feet of hot sand to the shoreline, took our shoes off, and felt the refreshing cold water on our toes. The next year, there was less beach. The year after that, even less. What was happening? We know that the constantly moving sand, wind, and water make the duneslands the youngest and most fragile habitats in our region. But even old timers who had grown up in Zion were shocked by the changes. Then one summer, the entire foredune, where we were monitoring some endangered species, just disappeared. This twin cottonwood by the boardwalk was first about 100 feet back from the shoreline, then up to the high water mark. Then it became a little peninsula on the diminishing foredune. Then it became an island. In this photo here, taken June 8th, 2019, you can see the deep erosion around the cottonwood roots. When we were there July 5th, 2019, it was completely bare roots all the way around. The Great Sentinel fell a week later. The eastern leg of the boardwalk had to be entirely removed. The lake is already up to the transverse section now. In recent years, we have lost about 200 feet of beach, and if nothing changes, are on track to lose some more. I could write heartfelt obituaries for all the listed and rare plants lost there to the waves, but instead let me share with you a few of the other special species that still make their home there. Sand coreopsis, blue-eyed grass, stiff sandwort, prickly pasture rose, prickly pear cactus, butterfly weed, fringe puccoon, like 5 different kinds of milkweeds, wild lupine, Ohio spiderwort, shooting star, purple and white prairie clovers, several different blazing stars, including the kind of Dunesland ubiquitous cylindrical and rough blazing stars, blue-fruited dogwood, the rare dwarf birch, hoary puccoon and its cousin hairy. I could go on for a while, but you really have to see them for yourself. In an interview with WBEZ's Jerome McDonald last year, Brad Semmel says, "We're just seeing the natural history of Illinois literally wash into Lake Michigan. Thick stands of rare inland shadblow, Bailey's dogwood, and ninebark were washed away. The water was reaching up to huge, beautiful swaths of juniper and bearberry, state endangered plants characteristic of the Dunesland. On the dune just east of the boardwalk, there was a 20-foot long stand of endangered juniper. Here you see it, just a shadow of its former self. I was in tears when I saw it in tiny shreds beneath the boardwalk, the rest of it pulled into the waves and washed away. It was heartbreaking to see them torn apart and disappear into the lake. We needed to have a meeting of the minds, and soon." In 2018, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources implemented a volunteer shoreline monitoring program overseen by Illinois State geologist Dr. Ethan Therakoff, which Mariama Ba, one of our student interns for the Center for Conservation Leadership, and other volunteers helped implement. We went out monthly to measure the distance of the shoreline from pre-established PVC pipe benchmarks set well back on the dunes. We knew Hosah was in immediate trouble when first one, then a second of those benchmarks washed away, and then a second set washed away too. Prior to any human modifications to the shoreline, there was an abundant supply of sand moving along the shore of Lake Michigan, so eroded sand would soon be replaced by littoral drift. But as soon as piers, jetties, marinas, and other hardened structures appeared, this flow was altered. Add to that the natural rise and fall of lake levels and storms, you soon add a recipe for unmitigated erosion and resulting habitat loss. It was heartbreaking to watch. Last winter, the sidewalk and picnic pavilions were under 2 inches of lake water. I was frightened. With plants not seen elsewhere in the entire state, its precious biodiversity was under threat. Would we lose Hosah forever? Brad Semmel, heritage biologist and endangered species coordinator for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, met with Marilyn Krieger, Ken Click, and staff from the Lake County Forest Preserves. A plan to save rare plants most immediately in danger evolved. Our stewardship group, in addition to removing invasive herbaceous species and non-native woody brush, had been authorized to collect precious seed from Hosah and would continue to do so. Ken gathered a crew from the forest preserves, and the plants most in danger were relocated. Kelly Burdick would be their guardian for the meantime at the native plant nursery at Rollins Savannah. It was 2 days of hard work, made harder by the summer's heat, and once settled into their new beds, the plants needed lots of TLC and water. Dr. Glenn Adelson, professor of environmental studies at Lake Forest College, began making collections for the Elizabeth Lunn Herbarium there to document Hosah's diversity for posterity. David Sullenberger of the Chicago Botanic Garden committed to help bank seed. And any seed banked would have a herbarium specimen voucher at not only the Chicago Botanic Garden, but also the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. So far, 40 species have been collected and vouchered. Dr. Andrew Hipp, herbarium curator at Morton Arboretum, also agreed to house Hosah vouchers to amplify their collection of regional flora. Dr. Gerald Wilhelm, co-author of Flora, the Chicago region, agreed to verify all vouchers submitted to the Arboretum. And partners at the Chicago Park District expressed interest in providing homes for the rescued plants in sites secure from erosion. My other vocation is scientific illustration. In 2019, instigated by a request from Emma England, then president of Lake County Audubon Society, to produce educational materials for the Sharing Our Shores initiative, I designed the Field Museum Dunesland Habitat Guide. Ostensibly, it was to celebrate the return of piping plovers, Maudie and Rose, nesting in the Chicago area, but it was also to raise awareness about the biodiversity of the fragile habitat they need. In 2020, the Nature Conservancy of Illinois produced and distributed this Dunesland Habitat bandana as a thank you to the piping plover monitors, shoreline stewards, and volunteers who keep these habitats healthy for people and wildlife alike. This site was so special to Floyd Swink, Ray Schulenberg, and many great botanists who studied it and valued its biodiversity that they frequently led field trips to it. And it is just as special to those who study and enjoy it today. It's hard not to feel a deep awe in the face of nature's power, even when it irrevocably changes a landscape as precious as this one is to us. Watching Hosah change over time has pounded home the lesson of just how fragile this dunesland habitat is. So here's the takeaway. It is so important to preserve each and every natural remnant before it's too late. Dr. Gerald Wilhelm, ecologist and co-author of the celebrated Flora of the Chicago region, urges us to cherish even the smallest of remnants, no matter how small or degraded. Their size or loss of quality does not diminish their spiritual value to us. We, on the other hand, become more and more diminished if we do not protect and restore them as best we can. I believe in nature's resilience, but nature is resilient only as long as we do not deprive it of its life's blood. There is a great sadness when human cultural choices destroy it. All of the sacred traditions call us to good stewardship of the earth and its beings. We each become more spiritually depauperate with the loss of even one species, much less the thousands that have disappeared just in the last century. Hosah's challenges are profound, but stewarding here has always seemed like the next right thing to do to me. From my experience at Hosah, I'm more convinced than ever that more education outreach will work if we deeply examine our cultural choices through a lens of true sustainability and environmental ethics. Each species has a right to exist in and of itself, not just in terms of its utility to humans. And it is up to us to be good stewards of what we have left. So this is just a thank you to everybody who has helped us. First, Marilyn Krieger, Executive Director, Zion Park District, Brad Semmel in Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Ken Click, Kelly Burdick, Kelly Schultz, Gary Glowacki, Tom Smith, retired, Lake County Forest Preserves, Karen Tharp, Brooke Thoreau, Forest Courts, the Nature Conservancy of Illinois, Center for Conservation Leadership, Lake Forest Open Lands Association, Susie Hoffman, and David Solenberger, Gretel Kiefer, and Suzanne Macy from the Chicago Botanic Gardens, Ethan Therakoff, Robin Mateus from the Illinois Geological Survey, my friend Glenn Adelson from Lake Forest College, Andrew Hipp, Marlene, and Lindsay from Morton Arboretum, Laura Milker, Juliana Phillip, Todd Wilhelm, and of course Laurel Ross from the Field Museum, Gerald Wilhelm from the Conservation Research Institute, and all of our faithful workday volunteers, rare plant monitors, students, and advocates. We couldn't do any of this without you. Thank you so much.